Hello and welcome to Jazz Across the Pond, Jazz Interviewing Reimagined, a brand new and a very exciting bringing together of two great nations. It's jazz talking like you've never seen or heard it before. We welcome you all. So a very warm welcome along to Jazz Across the Pond, Jazz Interviewing Reimagined, with me, Roger Lee, aka the Jazz Cat.
And I'm Kevin Goldsby, and they call me Mr. G.
Mr. G, the Thelma to my Louise.
Okay, Louise, as long as I have top billing, I'm fine with that.
And we promise we won't be driving off any cliffs at the end of the show tonight.
Unless the interview's a total disaster, and I doubt it seriously. We've got a great guest tonight.
We seriously have. Very quickly, you obviously enjoyed last week's show.
I tell you what, it was unbelievable. I mean, you talk about a man wearing a lot of different hats. Bob Baldwin's an award-winning composer, arranger, performer, producer, talk show host, record label owner. The only thing we didn't talk about was his being an author. But I mean, we touched on everything else. It was a great interview.
Yeah, it was fabulous. And like always, if anybody sitting there watching and going, Bob Baldwin, oh no, we've missed it, you can still watch it.
Absolutely. It's always there on YouTube, and you can also see it on our Facebook pages as well.
Absolutely. So I tell you what, back to tonight. Now, a little bit different for everyone that tunes in religiously and our faithful legion of fans who tune in. They must have gone, well, that's a bit different. We thought we'd start with an intro from a wonderful album. The album is called Dreamwalker. The particular piece there was called The Night Walk. And we love that piece. The transcend between the two countries or the two continents is incredible.
You know, Roger, you're such a cheeky devil. That snippet is actually a great intro into our guest sound because he actually has created a fusion of contemporary jazz and world music. So well done, mate.
Why, thank you. I tell you what, should we bring him on?
Let's do it.
Hi, this is American jazz guitarist Reza from New York, and you are watching me on Jazz Across the Pond with the Jazz Cat and Mr. G. I hope you like the show.
Our very special guest is a socially conscious musical citizen of the world. He has a long established history of blazing fresh trails, pushing the limits and finding the unique ways to redefine what is possible in the contemporary jazz world. Working with some of the genre's most revered sidesmen, this Bangladesh-born and raised, New York City-based composer, guitarist, is certainly at the top of his game. This is going to be a good one. So please join us as we welcome the man himself. We are so pleased here on Jazz Across the Pond to welcome the man himself, Mr. Reza Khan. Good evening.
Hello, Roger, and hello, Kevin. How are you guys?
Good, good.
This is an interview we've been so looking forward. This has been in the diary for a few months now. And of course, now we've got your launch of your brand new album, which we wanted to coincide with this interview. We are so pleased now, and we've got so much to talk about. So let's crack on. Let's just find out a bit more about the man himself then. So born in a musical family in his what is now is Bangladesh, or technically the official is the People's Republic of Bangladesh. And Reza, your brothers and yourself received a firm grounding in Indian classical music from your father, an instrumentalist, composer, and a poet, apparently. You were trained in Indian percussion, and then from the time you were either 8 or 9, our researchers have come back to us and they went, we couldn't establish what it is. It was either 8 or 9. However, this is the big one. However, your musical world changed forever when your brother brought home, I hate to say this, a bootleg copy of Peter Frampton's 1976 album, Comes Alive. We won't give you your address, don't worry, you're fine, you're safe with us. You were then introduced into American pop rock culture, which included the Eagles, Grand Funk, and the American band America. Now, can we ask our first question of you? Hopefully all the information we've just given out is correct. You're not going to contradict us and someone go, no, not me. And how did your father take to this change in this musical taste, taking it from the wonderful Asian music to over here to the west, the west side of music and that? How did your father take to it?
Well, first of all the information is correct. My father was a world traveler like myself. He used to travel for work all over the world, and he used to bring home nice surprises as a token, like, Bart Bacharach and vinyl, the 50s, 60s music of America and the Western world, and just drop them off in the living room, turntable, and play, look, this is the kind of music they're playing on the other side of the ocean. And we used to listen to them and say, wow. And in the meantime, we had a very, very strict routine of practicing classical music. Indian music is not easy, as you know. It requires a lot of time, So we were 5 brothers and a sister. We were all musicians at one point in our lives. And, I started with tabla as a percussion instrument, spent 11 years doing it since I was 3 years old. And others picked up like sarod or sitar and all kind of Ravi Shankar or style of ragas and sagas, we call them. And we grew up in that environment. So I wouldn't say I was the first one who actually left that part. My oldest brother, he formed a trio and very inspired by the band America. So he used to, and Crosby, Stills and Nash, for example. So you have to understand the cultural context. In Bangladesh, we don't have guitars. We don't have Western music. Whoever gets hold of a first vinyl, it gets to every neighborhood, everybody. We listen to it, we tape it, and we listen. I said, wow. So time and time again, Ventura Highway and all of these songs, A Horse with No Name, my brother will learn, and then we have to share the guitar. So he will bring home a guitar, and we will say, okay, next half hour is yours. You can learn whatever you can learn out of it. So that's how we progressed over the years.
Well, Reza, speaking of Western music, in the past, you've also commented about being influenced by Pink Floyd and the Alan Parsons Project for their legendary concept albums. And those were 2 groups that I loved as well. So was that influence the beginning of your desire to create projects of your own with what I would call like an auditory fabric woven with common threads from start to finish?
I always like conceptual albums. You will never see a record of mine that doesn't have a story flowing from top to the bottom. From the very beginning, when I started writing music, because I was in love with Pink Floyd, and I'm still in love with Pink Floyd. They are like the legendary band, and the way and I think, obviously Alan Parsons is another one. Everything is thematic. Everything goes from the beginning to the end. And I don't know why we don't have music. Another band from Roger's side of the world is Marillion that I love. And it is the same concept that they make album also very thematic as well. So those are the influences I had. So when I write my own music, if you listen to Dream Walker, for example, there's a whole story. Okay, if you listen to Wind Dance, there's a whole story. The current album has its own story as well. So,
well, you also mentioned the Rippingtons and Acoustic Alchemy as influences as well, and plus some, like a little Brazilian music, I understand, a little bossa nova, and a little samba. So by any chance, was Stan Getz and Charlie Bird's project jazz samba an influence by any chance?
I don't know. I'm just totally mesmerized by Brazilian music to begin with. And I played with a lot of Brazilian musicians in my life.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, Sergio Pereira, who is on the record, he's been on 2 records of mine. You know,
Right.
with his help, I met a lot of very interesting Brazilian musicians. Mauricio Zattarelli, the drummer, for example. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, an excellent musician to have on any recording or gigs. But I just find the composition and the chord progression in Brazilian music very sophisticated. Stan Getz of the world, you know, I mean, Jovan. I mean, there is no word to describe how that music inspires me to write. So my first thing, I'm half Brazilian by no means. So.
Well, Charlie Bird obviously was a guitarist from my state where I live now in Virginia, and his interpretation on guitar is brilliant. If you have an opportunity, give Jazz Samba a listen. But the other question I wanted to ask you is that, you know, you've talked about Pat Metheny in the past, but you said that he actually made me want to make myself better and better musically. Would you expound on that for our listeners, please? Exactly what you meant by that.
Well, Pat is a legend. You know, he's almost like my hero in many different ways. You know, when in 1978, when the first White Album record came to Bangladesh, all right, I think it came to the older part of Dhaka, the capital. And the word went around like there is this amazing record with Mark Egan, Danny Gottlieb, Pat, and of course Lyle Mays, the late great Lyle Mays. And I listened to that record. I still now, I get a chill every time I listen to that record. That record totally changed my life in many different ways, because the way freeform improvisation in a honest funk, jazz, fusion composition, the way they did it in a single take with no overdub, it is unbelievable, especially for the time, you know, in 1978, 79. You know, I came from a very rock and roll background. I think the transformation happened after that record I heard. And then later on down the road, when I listened to Rippington's the Acoustic Alchemy, they bring that modern vibe to it. You know, each band, they are excellent in the way they write their music, the compositions, but they all are different, right? I just want to make sure that I understand that the way Pat has completely reinvented himself in record after record after record. Very difficult to find musicians in today's, you know, genre. You know, it's pretty much the same if you hear it. So I try my best to write different style every time I write music. You know, really, you know, he's an idol.
Well, the funny, you mentioned about that. I was sorry, Kevin. I was just going to just mention about that. Behind me, I'm in my den of iniquity. This is my CD wall. Okay, and you're talking about that album. Now I know if I reach over here, there is the album you're talking about. In the
right.
Pat Metheny. Now your section, your section is just over here, just past the door. This is such a section of CDs. It's one of the few things that you can spot from space. All right, this wall of CDs, it just goes on forever. But never mind. Yeah, a classic album, I must admit.
Well, one other quick question, Reza. Well, Roger puts that CD away. You know, you've been talking about the influence on Western music. I'm curious, now you formed your first band, which is called Yours Sincerely. And the group had a lone album called Members Only, which sold, actually, it's an incredible number. It's 500,000 copies. So out of curiosity, what type of music was Members Only?
Bengali pop. I was in high school, and you know, and
you're such an honest man. I love it.
I mean, I was in high school. You know, a couple of love songs that in our country, Western music is a taboo at that time. So only very few people who were able to write Western music and perform. You know, we have to be very careful. So, you know, later on down the road, now there's rock band everywhere in my country. You know, there's hundreds of them, thousands of them. But at that point in time, you're destroying your roots. You're destroying your culture with the MTV generation, right? So, yeah, I mean, you know, in a country of 170 million people, you know, 500,000 copies is nothing if you think about it.
Okay, you don't need to qualify it that way, but no, 500,000 copies, man. Come on.
So, Reza, you graduated from Queen's College with a degree in computer science, yet a calling of a humanitarian has led you everywhere, from Asia, where you were introduced to poverty and human rights abuses that inspired you to work for the United Nations. Amazing. We take our hat off to you. To Angola, where you were a member of the peacekeeping force in the war-torn country. In the late 1990s, you lived in South Africa. A lot of people don't know this about you. We really have done our research, I'm telling you. It was there you performed and started to compose music and that, and you married and you started your family. So please tell us more about this wonderful life that we've just alluded to there, and then we're going to play a piece of your music.
Well, I was a foreign student when I came to the US. So the only university I could afford was Queen's College, so I went there. I graduated. And in my culture, we were all following this notion of arranged marriage. So I was told by my dad, said, come back. So before I went back to Bangladesh, I went to the UN building and I said, I'm going to buy some gifts at the gift shop. So I was buying flags, lapel pins, and all of these things. And I met the buyer of the gift shop and basically said that I'm looking for an analyst to help me with some computer programming. I was fresh out of school, graduated. And I said, what kind of issues do you have? And he said, well, my point of sale system doesn't integrate with my inventory control system. I'm very keen. Give me a symbolic contract and I'll work on it. And that's my door into the UN. But most importantly, as soon as I got into the UN, I realized how much work we have to do, in terms of the sustainable development goals that we do it today, to follow and track the peacekeeping side of the house. So very soon, my mind completely changed, and I traveled the world with the UN, pretty much everywhere in Africa and Asia, in different UN offices. And I really hope we make a lot of difference in terms of poverty reduction, in terms of maintaining peace. So it's a very rewarding experience. I left the UN for a while. I went back to South Africa. This is where I got married to an Italian. And then we have a daughter. She's 21 now. She's studying architecture in Boston. And we spent nice 5-6 years over there. I went to play with a club, which is almost like a Blue Note type of environment in Camps Bay, Cape Town. George Lee, who used to be with Hugh Masekela, they used to jam over there during the old time, pre-apartheid time. So, a lot of jam session in Soweto with local musicians, and learned a lot about African rhythms. The rhythms in Angola, for example, Kizomba is a rhythm, is a half Brazilian, half Spanish, and half African. Where do you find this experience? West African rhythms are amazing to work with as a conceptual.
Well, what we're going to do now, we're going to take a quick break from the interview now, because apparently there is a small tribe of people deep in the heart of the Amazon who may not have heard of your music. All right, might not understand that they haven't got electricity, but never mind. So we're going to take a quick break from the interview now. We're going to play a track from your 6th album, your brand new album. The album is called Imaginary Road. The track we're going to play, I understand, again, is one of your favorite tracks. It's called The Midnight Runner, and we're going to come straight back to this wonderful interview, and we are so enjoying it. Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Kevin and myself, and it's Jazz Across the Pond. And here's the wonderful track now from the man himself, Mr. Reza Khan. So you've been listening to a wonderful track. It's called The Midnight Runner. It's from an amazing album, Imaginary Road. We're going to be talking a lot more about this album and the wonderful musicians you got on there. I mean, it's like the who's who of like, I'd love to see your book of musicians. You must just flick through and go, oh, should we get to the new album? Anyway, it's a brilliant album. It really is. And we're going to be playing another track at the end of it. Kevin, carry on.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was since releasing your 2008 debut project, Painted Diaries, you've headed 5 more critically acclaimed projects. And we're also excited to discover that you've launched a new straight-ahead fusion quintet with Mark Egan and Danny Gottlieb called Moontree Quintet. We were wondering if you could share a little bit with our listeners what this power quintet is you're putting together.
Well, I've been writing these tunes. Moontree is a concept. I don't know if you know about the Japanese myth. It's about, moon is also about fertility. It's a strength. So I saw this painting in my mother-in-law's house in Venice a couple of years ago, and she had this beautiful portrait of a tree which has different shapes of moon as a blossom. Okay, inspired me to come up with a name, and then I started writing tunes, and I asked Mark Egan, who's everybody knows who Mark Egan is. I don't need to introduce him. So we were performing together at the Blue Note just before COVID time, and I said, look, Mark, I really would like to do a jazz quartet, quintet, trio, something in that nature. And he looks at, can you really do something like a quintet or trio, because your style of music is really not that. I said, I don't know, I will give it a shot, and I'm pretty sure it's going to end up being a fusion project. So I wrote 10 tunes, and we're hitting the studio with Mark and Danny, most likely end of May or early June, depending on availability. And we're going to record this tune, and David Mann is going to come in and do the whole orchestration behind it. But it's going to be a fantastic project. I love the tunes I wrote, and I'm not going to give away the surprise.
Oh, come on.
It's an excellent project, and fantastic tunes. It's not designed for radio, but I'm sure some out there will listen to it.
Right. Well, Roger and I were talking the other day about how if you look across your 6 projects, I mean, you've had a stellar lineup of musicians. Now, you've already alluded to Mark Egan, incredible bassist. He's been on 6 of your projects. David Mann, a multi-instrumentalist, has been on 6. And I have to say, Matt King on piano is brilliant. He's been on 6 of your projects. But not only that, you've had Philippe Sace on keys, Andy Snitzer. Both of those guys have been on 4 projects. You've had Miles Gilderdale from Acoustic Alchemy on 2 projects. And then you've had Niles on guitar, Jeff Keshua on sax, Mark Antone on guitar, Nelson Rangel on flute and sax, and Hal D. Gregorius on keys. I mean, that's a very impressive list of guest artists. Share with our viewers how your collaboration with your fellow musicians has changed from your pre-COVID projects to Imaginary Road.
I think if I have to say it very simply, when I work with my collaborators, I give them a green field and let them paint their canvases. I don't dictate them what to write, what to play. They need to be inspired by listening to the compositions I write, and when they feel it, they do magic. And not a single project that I have done, I have told anyone, first, I'm an uneducated person when it comes to music. I don't read, I don't write, I feel. Okay.
Right.
So I have David Manns of the world, I have Matt Kings of the world who helped me out writing the scores and everything that I write compositionally. And then, but I always tell Philip Sace, for example, do your magic, whatever inspires you. He never tells me, what do you want me to do here? The same thing goes with David Mann and the others. And for me, it's working really well, because sometimes when you are so much into writing the tune, you have a very strong opinion about the music itself, because yes, I'm 57 years old.
A baby. So
I have a very strong
years younger
opinion
than
about,
I am.
so strong opinion about what I write. So I get into a fight if somebody tells me, I'm going to change this, I'm going to change that. So this is the reason I start learning how to delegate, you know.
Right.
What do you feel when you listen to my music? What you're going to do there? And I think it's working really well.
Well, I'll tell you that Roger is a big Acoustic Alchemy fan, and I know that he has been absolutely shocked because you started off by talking about, how Acoustic Alchemy was a musical influence of yours as you were growing up. And as I just said, yet you've got Miles Gilderdale on 2 of your projects, Wind Dance and Imaginary Road. I mean, how did that happen?
Well, Miles Gilderdale, I was introduced to Miles by Sandy Shore from smoothjazz.com. And then we became good friends. I just love that man. He is so humble, no ego. You can talk to him easily. And his approach to music is also, it's so sweet in terms of how he talks to you, what he wants to do, and a phenomenal guitarist.
Yes.
I play electric guitar, but I like to get a different vibe that goes very well with my style of playing, and Miles just does that.
Well,
so I mean, after the first gig with Wind Dance, and I wrote this 3 tunes, and I said, Miles, I think your style goes really well with these tunes, and I think he did a beautiful job.
Well, in his versatility, I mean, he plays steel string, or he can play nylon string, either way. So I mean, you've got some flexibility there. You can use him any way you want.
Yeah, very much.
I think he is very versatile, and like I said, I mean, I'm a fan of Acoustic Alchemy, and I think I mean, I have seen him every time they're in New York. I will chat with Miles when they come in here in the US, and I think this is a long road. We're going to be traveling together.
Well, it's interesting. One of the bits I'll pick up on this bit you were saying about the musicians, and when you get them there and you show them total respect. There was a wonderful documentary with Marcus Miller after the Al Jarreau album Tenderness, and he had the likes of Eric Gale and Joe Sample and Steve Gadd, and he said with a musician, he said, if you over rehearse a musician, they get bored and then they start improvising, doing their own things as they're going. And it's all about getting to that peak of level, and you get them just where they're on fire, and then you record it. And because the moment you start rehearsing too much, I said, it's gone. So yeah, I exactly agree with yourself. We've played a track from Imaginary Road. Now, I am going to ask you a question now, because I'm fully aware that your previous album, the wonderful Next Train Home, you actually got that because you were severely dehydrated, and you were during your travels with the UN, and you were confined to hospitalization. And whilst you were there, you actually wrote these tracks. You had your guitar and that, and you started to write all the rest of it, which I just like. That is incredible how you can do that. You weren't feeling 100%, and yet you can come up with an album like that with an amazing lineup. Now, am I right in saying we've got a very good research team on both sides of the pond, and they do their homework. They really do their homework, and we let them loose, and away they run away. They come back and they go, "Okay, Kevin and Roger, here's the information." Are we right in saying that with this latest album, during your last trip to Valencia, you and your band, you performed at the Matisse Club, and it's a place where jazz salsa music mingles freely, and it inspired you for this album. Can you tell us briefly about what the inspiration you got from Spain for this new album?
Well, for my work, I was traveling a lot in Spain, and Spain as a country, I also love the people, the warmth, and also, I mean, the music itself. So, and also this is going to be my future home of retirement. So there's many things that comes together. I mean, of course, the ideas were already bubbled before traveling to Spain. But what happened is we went to Spain with the same team, the musician Mauricio, Mark, myself, Sergio Pereira, who lives in Valencia, Spain. And Moritz, yeah, pretty much. And we had this incredible sax player, Alexei Leon, over there. So we did this show in the Matisse Club. At midnight, there's a big salsa band club comes in, and everybody's dancing. And it's just like almost like going to Iguana or Copacabana in New York. All right. But we had this juice flowing energy-wise in a live setting. All right. And we were all hyped up. The next day we actually went to the studio and started playing with these scratch tracks that I wrote. And, I mean, in 2 days, we finished the record. Which was amazing. I'm like not more than 2 takes per tune. And I did not even edit anything. I mean, we just left it the way it is. Let it be 5 minute long, let it be 6 minute long. You can see it from the time, there's probably, I had to like really chop it up to make a radio edit version of the other 2 tunes that's gonna come up as a single. But Waiting for the Sky, no edits, nothing.
Wow.
So
that's great. We started the show before you joined us into the room, and that we started off. We had to do it for our listeners from your wonderful album Dreamwalker, and there was a Night Watch. We actually played that wonderful little bit of an intro where it seems to transcend from Bangladesh. And I know Kevin is desperate to ask a question about it.
Well, I was worried about what you were going to say about how your father was reacting to your, picking up and wanting to pursue Western music. I noticed that when I listened to that snippet, we played a little bit of Night Watch from your, like as we said, from your 2013 project Dreamwalker, and it's an awesome track and it's an awesome project. But simply curious now, did you play the sitar on the intro, or was it a guitar played through a synthesizer?
it was a sample loop library that I picked out and I tweaked it.
I didn't know whether I wanted to ask that question because part of me, for the sake of your father, wanted you to say, oh yes, I knew enough, that was what I was able to do. But then another part of me said, but if you played it through a synthesizer, that's that whole Pat Metheny thing back again. But we'll let it go.
Yeah. We've got 10 minutes left and there is just so many questions. You've got 6 albums out. We love every one of them. We feature them, and you're absolutely right. Everyone has got its own story. It's not just individual tracks. The whole, when you listen to it, and they just are mind blowing. They're absolutely incredible. What do you feel from Painted Diaries, your first album, right up to your newest one? I mean, how do you feel musically these have changed?
Well, Painted Diary is my first attempt to write music for the Western world. All right, so I was playing in a cover band, traveling from Las Vegas to California to, I used to work with Deloitte and Touche, and they used to have this corporate battle of the band contest. So I was part of Deloitte and Touche corporate band, and we got to the regional finals at one point, and we went to the NAMM, and we went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Cleveland, to perform in front of Joe Walsh and Beef, all of this, Blondie and everybody else. The thing is, Painted Diary is a transition from rock and roll into something that is unknown at that point in time, 2008, because I was still trying to figure out what kind of music I should be writing. You can see from Painted Diaries, I moved into a Simple Plan album, where still I'm trying to figure out there are hooks of pop and blues and of Middle Eastern influence in violin, right? And then I think I got hit by a bus and I wrote Dreamwalker. Dreamwalker is all about transcending to a realm that you have to imagine where you are going in the middle of the night, right? Similar to the song that you just heard, Midnight Runner. You're restless in the middle of the night. You don't know, your mind is thinking about 20 million things and you cannot stop running. And the same kind of philosophy that went into writing Dreamwalker. And then I took a pause and I was talking to Sandy Shore. I really need to bring in some additional bodies on my next record. And also to reward some of the musicians at that point in time that I was touring with. They were never featured in any of my albums. So I invited them in to write some music with me. And then with the help of Sandy, I got hooked up with Nelson Rangel. And then Philip Sayes hooked me up with Marc Antoine and Rick Braun. And Miles Giltadell, came through Sandy Shore. And Andy Schnitzer has been a longstanding friend since the very first record, Painted Diaries.
Yeah.
So, one thing led to other. This industry is weird. You are in a studio, you are meeting with somebody, and they says, oh, this music needs this drummer. This music needs that So they make a phone call and you meet with them, and slowly your network grows. And this is where I am today.
Incredible. Well, I mean, we could just chat to you all night long. It's incredible. Kevin, have you got any last question?
I do. You know, Reza, there have been several artists that have dabbled in what I would call that contemporary jazz and world music fusion that you've put together. I know Kyle Eastwood back in 2004 did his Paris Blue project where he actually dabbled a little bit with that Mid-Eastern sound on a song called Marrakesh. You mentioned Andy Snitzer. He had his Traveler project from 2011 where he was impacted by literally touring the world and being exposed to different types of music. So my question for you, I hope you love this question because it's a little bit of a setup. Is it possible that your contemporary jazz and world music fusion that you've created might be the blueprint for the genre, given that the world gets a little smaller every day?
Ooh.
I certainly hope so. I hope that we start getting out of our little pockets here and there and embrace the world. You know, I mean, the world has a lot to offer. If you think about what Mr. A.R. Rahman is doing in the Bollywood industry in terms of music, if you look at West Africa music, if you look at some of the Portuguese music coming out of Africa, so Middle Eastern music has been evolving over the last couple of years. You know, and why not bring them all into one new genre?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, world music, if you think about it, it's not about representing a particular country's music. Brazilian music has been out there for longest time.
Yeah.
We still call them jazz, by the way. All right. So there's nothing wrong with mixing a little bit of Indian and Brazilian with contemporary jazz. You know, we can do wonders with them. I think Pat did it. Pat Metheny did it in two of his album with heavily Brazilian influence.
Very much so.
Are they really Brazilian? I don't think so. They're fusion, but they're beautifully done.
But isn't it always that when you have an amalgam of different types of music that the end result is greater than the parts? So
yeah, you know, it's so true. I mean, when you have all of these influences, the trick, I think that, you know, I mean, even though I'm from Bangladesh, I have 45 years living in the Western society. So I'm heavily influenced by the society I live in, but I'm also fortunate enough to travel the world and live outside of this society as well.
right.
So anybody who is writing music, I strongly recommend bringing some people, some well-known musicians from different parts of the world and sit in a room and see what happens. You'll be surprised.
Amazing. Good question, Kevin. Well, unfortunately, time has beaten us. Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Kevin, Mr. G, myself, the Jazz Cat, Roger Lee. We've had the immense pleasure of chatting to the man himself, Mr. Reza Khan. If you are thinking, wow, which album to buy, my advice to you is buy all 6. All right? Right from Painted Dreams, you got A Simple Plan. We've got the whole right through. The Next Train Home, The Dream Walker, and of course the new one, and we're going to finish off the interview playing a track from this album. It's the track which has been released. It's called Waiting for the Sky. Reza, it is an absolute pleasure to talk to you. We can't wait for this new project when it comes out. Who knows, you may even give us the premiere playing here. I mean, so absolutely, it's been fabulous. Reza Khan, thank you so much.
No problem, Roger and Kevin. It's a pleasure having to meet you both in person via this iPad.
It's absolutely fabulous. Kevin, say goodnight, Kevin.
Good night, Kevin.
And it's good night from him. From Jazz Across the Pond, next week, another great interview in store. But meanwhile, can't thank you enough. Have a wonderful evening, wonderful day in New York City. Ladies and gentlemen, the wonderful Reza Khan. Thank you so much.